Today, I am joined by one of the most underrated and influential people in all of world football, Socceroos Assistant Manager and soon-to-be author, Rene Meulensteen. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rene.
You're welcome.
Now, we are going to talk about your book in just a moment, but I like to ask a, softball question as a first introductory question, and that is just where did your love and passion for football first begin?
Well, my mother always used to say that as soon as I could walk, I had a ball on my feet.
Yep.
So it must have started really, really early. Well, I come from Holland, from a very rural little village called Beugen. It's right in the middle between, let's say, Nijmegen, Eindhoven, and Venlo, close to the German border. We were only a stone throw away from the local football club. So as soon as I was growing up, and I think at the time you could only join the local football club when you were 9. I managed to sneak in when I was 7. So I played a few years with boys that were much older than me. And it's grown ever since. And to such an extent that when I was sort of 16, moving, to 18, moving to more senior sort of things and in life and football, I couldn't envision any future with me without being in football. I wanted to make the football in football. Of course, I had a dream to become a professional player, which turned out to be at that time, in the late 70s, 80s, very difficult because scouting wasn't what it is now. But I also developed an early appetite for coaching. And when I did that, I've always knew if it's not going to be as a footballer, I want to make my money as a coach. So I pursued that path from then onwards, and it led me to an unbelievable career.
Now, I think everyone who's a football fan as a kid sort of has that dream, as you mentioned, of becoming a professional footballer, maybe really ambitious dreams of playing in a World Cup and scoring a winning goal. But you said it was quite difficult back then to become a professional footballer. When was that moment when you realized that it might actually be possible? Was there a moment where you realized professional football might be possible, or did it just happen that one day you're in this journey and then you realize, hang on, I've made it?
No, what I did do myself, I did try to shape my footballing career as much as I could. I tried to shape my own career as much as I could. So I did go and play in another amateur club further away, but a few divisions higher up. Years after that, again, I joined another club, which they played then in third tier of Dutch football, because now that is all reshaped, the whole setup then. But then it was, you had, let's say, what we call the Eredivisie, which is the highest level. Then you had the first division, and then you had sort of a semi-professional sort of tier, which divided in 3 different leagues, A, B, and C, depending on the, where in the country you were. And I then used to play for a club called the Treffers in Groesbeek, which was really still holds, I think, one of the best amateur, records of all time. So it was a big club, really good level. A lot of professional players that sort of came to the end of the career would drop back into that level. But then I got the opportunity to go and coach at NEC Nijmegen, which was a professional outfit. They played in, I think, in the Eredivisie at the time. And I was sort of going to play in the reserve team and then coaching the under-14s. And I just thought it was a double-edged sword. See how it goes. Maybe I get a crack at it. But more than anything, I was then really convinced I need to start to invest in that coaching career, which I did. And after 2 years, I've already got given the opportunity, to go to Qatar to work with one of my, my all-time heroes in coaching, Will Curver. And I was only 29, so I could have still played on for another 5 or 6 years. But I choose differently, and it turned out to be the right decision.
And in world football, it's a very rare occurrence that you'll find a manager, still in their 20s. That's quite young. That's pretty much a baby in terms of a manager. Did you find when you first started stepping into this other world of football that perhaps people didn't take you as seriously as they should have, considering your age, or was that never an issue with you?
No, but I didn't step into management straight away, Sean. What I did was I became the assistant from Will Curver in Qatar for the Qatar Football Association. And what we did was we really shaped the Qatari future for at grassroots level. There was nothing under 14, so everything from under 14 down, under 12s, 11s, under 10s, under 9s, under 8s. We started to create an environment, for those to select those kids to come bring them in, and we trained with them 6 days a week, and basically. That was because Will Gerver wanted to make his new, DVD videos, educational videos. When we started managing the Al Ittihad, which is now Al Kharafa in Qatar, when I was, I think, 30, 32, 33. So I was still young. I was still young, but the good thing was I've already lived in Qatar for about, let's say, 4 years. And I knew the language fairly well. I knew the mentality fairly well, and it worked. It worked out really, really well. When I took the teams, I did Al Ittihad, as I said. We won the Arab Cup, which was the equivalent of of a big international trophy at the time. All that has been replaced now by Champions League, and other cup competitions. But it was a big trophy at the time, and at the same time, we won the His Highness the Apparent Cup, which was a different prize to win at the time. So I won two prizes in the first season, and then I was still working with the Qatar Football Association as well. I was still managing the under-17 national team, and then a year after, I managed Al Sadd, which was a different team, and we won the Emir Cup, the equivalent of the FA Cup, let's say. So that was all good, and then Manchester United came knocking. So it all went into quite a fast. In the fast, run of events just so to speak.
That's, as you mentioned, Manchester United come knocking, and no disrespect to Qatari football, but that's a whole nother level when you're talking a club like Manchester United and what they expect and just the prestige of this club. So when you first had interest from Manchester United, firstly, how did that come about? And secondly, what was the first thing that you did when you realized that, it was a serious offer? Because Manchester United is just such a massive club. This is such a massive opportunity. I'd imagine you probably would have pinched yourself once or twice.
I did. I certainly did. But I have to say, many times I discussed it with Will Curvel, and I said, Will, your work is by far too good to go to waste in a country like Qatar. Everybody that's around here with us, players and staff, will benefit from it. But can you imagine if this would have been introduced in a big club, in a footballing country with a footballing culture and a mentality and everything? So we discussed that a lot. How did it come about was because after me doing my badges in Holland, youth coaching badge, and then you had 3 different senior levels, I came to sort of trainer coach 1, and then the next step was the professional, the pro license. But I knew that was going to be difficult for me to actually get accepted on it, just because the fact that I maybe had never played professional football. So what I did, I went to England to also do my badges there. So I had to start again, the prelim badge, and then it was whatever all those badges are called, the FA badge and the full badge and the A license. So I went going back and forwards to England to do those badges, and at one point I met Dave Richardson, and Dave Richardson was put in place by Howard Wilkinson because he set up all the academies in a certain way in England at the time. And Dave Richardson, with a team of 3 people, they were sort of looking after the academies, whether they hit all the way that the academy should be run. And at one point, I was with the Qatari on the 16 team national team in Lillishall in England, Lillishall in England. No, that was not true. We were at Kiel, and there was a massive tournament on, and Dave Richardson was there, and he's tried to get me into England in different clubs, and it never really materialized. So he asked me to sort of do a demonstration training for their coaching courses. There was about 60 coaches, which was ideal because I've worked with those players for 4 years, so I could actually show them the whole way from how did we started, how did we take it into 1v1 competition, small-sided games, and eventually into 11v11. And I remember we play in England at the time, which was all players from Man United, Arsenal, all the big teams, players in good academies and all that. And I remember we losing 1-0, but we played them off the park. We were by far the better team. They couldn't handle us. And that to me was the proof of, if you do this and you do this with young kids in a really good, environment and a culture, this is going to be unbelievable. And Dave saw that. He saw my demonstration. He saw our game. And he said, we definitely need this in England because this is what's lacking in the academies. So he was trying hard for me and worked hard. Nothing materialized until he rang me one day and he says, listen, Rene, Les Kershaw, the academy manager for Manchester United, has approached me. They're looking for a technical coach. They can't find anybody in England. I suggested you. Would you be up for a chat with him? And I know that you're coming over for a coaching conference. And I said, yeah, fine, no problem at all. And so I met Les with Jeff Watson, one of the scouts in the academy in a little chef somewhere around Stafford. And we had a good 2-hour meeting, and I had some books with me, and I had the video that I made with Wheel, which was called The Creative Dribbler, which explained everything really what we're coming from. And that was where the seed was planted. And another interesting thing was with that, whilst I was working in Qatar at the time, Dave Mackay was working at that time when I had the under-16s, he had the under-17s, 18s. And he was the legendary player from Tottenham Hotspur, who won the league in the late 50s, 60s, Scottish international. And he was very highly regarded by Sir Alex Ferguson. And I stayed with Dave actually around the time that I had that meeting with Les. And I mentioned it afterwards. And I said to Dave, I just want you to know what's going on, because I don't want you to be surprised if you hear my name in connection with Manchester United. Anyway, Dave was the one that rang Sir Alex and said, listen, I believe you are looking at a coach to bring in the academy. And I know him very well, and I can recommend him as a coach and as a person. So that put a lot of weight in the scale for Sir Alex, and it was then after that I came back, in I think in October it was, and Dave gave me a ring and he says, hi Rene, it's Dave Mackay here. Has Sir Alex Ferguson rang you? And I started laughing because he was always full of jokes, always. And I said, no. He said, he hasn't. He says, but I've just hung up on Prince Charles at the time. So I said, no. He was a bit annoyed. He said, no. I says, listen, Dave, check the number, because last time I saw you, Qatar has added a 5 after their country code. So there's an extra 5 to be dialed. He said, that might be the problem. And he said, let me check. And 10 minutes later, Sir Alex rang me and spoke about everything, spoke about a meeting with Les, spoke about Dave Mackay, and he invited me over to come to United when we had a break, which I did in January.
Now, oftentimes when, I've talked to coaches who have gone to bigger clubs or clubs with a lot of history, and they have big ideas of changing things, of implementing new things, they've mentioned that it's taken quite a long time to convince the higher-ups or the players or whoever it may be to buy into these principles and these ideas. Was this a case with you? Did it take quite some time to convince people to start playing your way? Or was this just something that people had full faith in you, they just believed in you, and you're able to kind of mold these players and all this, this coaching your way and create your own sort of dynasty from day one?
Players is not a problem, Sean. Players is not a problem. Players, the key with players, if you create the right environment, players will always respond. The key is obviously, like you said, but the biggest secret lies in the word change. Don't use change. Change creates resistance. I always use the word add. Add is more. Everybody wants to know, what is it? And if they see it's good, they will take it. They will embrace it. So, and I think the biggest thing that helped me was Sir Alex Ferguson himself, because he called a meeting one day with all the staff, full-time and part-time. And that was when we were already like just the start of the season. It was, let's say, beginning of September or when that happened. So I was sort of, already working at the club for about 2 months. So people had a a chance for it. But if somebody new comes in, there's always people that, think to themselves, okay, let's see what this is. And, especially the ones that have been there longer, and there's always a bit of skepticism. Ferguson took that all away. He took it all away by calling that meeting and saying, listen, let me explain what I brought in Rene. Because we've got this academy, we've got all the facilities, we've got all that. What we have in the expertise and the experience that he has in the field of technical development. And that's why we're bringing him in. And he's got something really important to add to all of us, to players and coaches. And that was it. And for me, that was because the support came obviously right from the top. You know what I mean? There was absolutely no. So I had all the cooperation and the support that I needed. And it went, to be fairly honest, it went fairly quickly. Yes, everything takes time, but it is a process of educating the coaches. It's a process of educating the parents, very importantly, because they need to be on the same sheet, that they know that they say the right things when they drop the kids off or when they pick them up after games. Because I introduced that 4v4, that 4v4 system instead of 8v8 on a Sunday for young kids, because we wanted to create more contact time, that the kids have more contact time on the ball and all that. But that was all things, that got implemented. And like I said, it all starts with, the support that you need from above. And like I said, use the word add, because it's one of the most powerful words in coaching.
I might need to add that to my repertoire of words and phrases to use. But one thing that I often notice in football, and I think a lot of football fans sort of tend to notice if we follow youth football and promising young players and all this. Matter of fact, I've interviewed some players who have been really top level youth players, pretty much top of the teams every time. But then when it comes to transitioning from youth football to senior football, they struggle. And often we'll see good players who absolutely dominate youth football struggle to make that step up to senior football. For you, being in this environment where you've sort of guided youth players into first team football, and you've also worked in first team football where you've brought along a lot of young players, why do you think so many top talents at youth level, struggle a lot to transition from youth football to senior football?
You also have to take in consideration where that is, Shah, because if you look at England in particular, one of the reasons is because England has created a monster over the last 30 years or so, which is called the Premier League. And the demands and everything and the money and everything has got bigger, and the expectation has got higher, and foreign owners with unrealistic ambitions at time puts a lot of pressure on everybody. So managers, whether it's League Two, League One, Championship, or even the Premier League itself, they're all under pressure to perform, to whether get another promotion or a championship and all that. So, and with young players, the one thing that you will find what they have in common, apart from the talent that they have, is inconsistency. It's normal. What we tend to do with Manchester United at the time, because we had the reserve team, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to take the reserve team and to explain Sir Alex Ferguson. I do believe that, I got what it takes to help those young players, but also it's an opportunity for you to see how I can sort of integrate all that technical development, what needs to happen on a grassroots level, because you can also still integrate it in senior level and help those boys to the next level. And that worked obviously really, really well, because then the key is that you bridge that gap from the reserve, into that first team level. And the only way to do it is to make sure that you create contact time where those young players have, get integrated with the first team, so they can see what the level is, they can see what the difference is. And we used to do that at Man United all the time. When I was first team coach and we played on a Saturday, and let's say the players that have played were on recovery sessions, the player that hadn't played for more than 30 minutes, they could train, or the players in the high energy years, they could train, but you could end up with 10 players. So if we wanted to have more, we brought in 4, 5, 6, whoever we needed from the reserve team. And all those young players had an opportunity, which is obviously highly motivational for those young players, but also they get to learn about the standards and the level. and the views. What we want and what we expect. So that's the way to do it. But you can't say naturally that everybody is, struggling, because you got smaller leagues, like for instance in Holland, where I come from, and the Dutch league. They got all those teams, even in the second division, and even they have no hesitation in playing really young players in the first team. So that transition from those young players is much easier, but also because of the style of football, the demands are slightly different, and Holland has got a bit of a reputation, to bring young players
Yeah.
through. But that might happen in other leagues as well. But the real bigger leagues, where the demands and the expectation is the highest, like the Premier League, and you'll see, and that's what I saw, you see a lot of waste of young players that have gone through all the academies, and then they fall to the wayside. An example is my own son, my youngest son, and he went from Man United Academy to Preston, had 2 good years there in the under-18s, then got given a contract, got sent out to Lancaster on a loan thing, what didn't help him whatsoever, and there was no interest from Preston. And I thought I'd bring him to Holland, because I knew that the system for these young players were far better. And he's now, he's already played 250 games, in the Dutch Eredivisie, which is by far more beneficial than hanging around, some League Two club in England, for instance.
Now, speaking of your son and, matter of fact, your daughter too, you've got a son, as you mentioned, who's a professional footballer. Your daughter's a professional football commentator. Obviously, you're, in professional football yourself. Is it a bit
And
strange?
my oldest son is in football as well. He's a coach stroke analyst at Stockport County.
Oh, wow, there you go. Is
The
it a
only
bit
one,
strange for
the
you?
only ones, Char, the only ones that are not in football is my wife and my dog.
Oh, wow. Well, maybe there's still time for your dog.
No,
Yeah, is it a bit strange for you being on the other side of this sort of football thing? For example, seeing your son as a player without, having to step back and let him have his own journey, or seeing your daughter commentate and be a pundit. Is it a bit hard for you being in football while letting them do their own things, but also kind of stepping back and, not wanting to intervene?
no, not at all. I enjoy it. I enjoy the journey, and they know. I wanted to make sure it's their journey and not mine, not shaped by mine. It has to be shaped by themselves. I'm there to support them, to help them whenever they want. I'm there. They know it. They know I'm here for them if they need me, which happens on a regular basis. That Peen reaches out about something, you know what I mean? And the same with Mella. But I'm not going to knock on their door or be on the phone all the time and say, what about this? What about that? What about this? Nothing. Like I said, they have to shape their own journey. They need to, take control of it. You need to empower them, because that makes them even stronger. And like I said, those journeys goes with ups and downs. And again, that all shapes the journey, and it shapes you as a person. So no, I love it. I just stand back and I watch them, and it's great. The only thing I've always said to my kids: do something that you love doing, because that is what I managed to do myself. To craft out a career in football. If I would have told my friends when we were like still playing in the park or on the local streets, and I would have said, listen, in so many years' time, I'm going to be a first team coach of Manchester United, they would have put me in a loony house. But if you have a dream, and that is always what Sir Alex used to say to me, is if you have a dream, make sure it's a big one. But the thing with that is that as long as you have got realistic ambitions and you create a clear pathway to set your targets to move up the ladder, you can achieve a lot. And that is what I did, and the kids are doing exactly the same.
Now, that last question was probably one of the worst pronunciations and one of the worst ways I've asked a question. But this next one, I'll try and get a bit clearer. Your book, titled United, Sir Alex and Me, coming out soon. Firstly, where did the title come from, and where did you get the idea to write a book from? Were you approached, or was this something you always wanted to do?
Bit of both. Bit of both. I've always sort of wanted to do something to share, sort of, a lot of my experiences, more than anything, also my expertise. I think there's a lot of knowledge to be taken out from even any inspiring coaches if they want to read it. A lot of people over time have asked me, they said, listen, Rene, you should write a book because you know so much about this and you've seen so many things and blah blah blah. So that's a bit about in terms of the title. Actually, the guy that has sort of helped me writing it, Wayne Barton, who is almost sort of the walking encyclopedia of Manchester United. He's written a lot of books himself already about Wayne Rooney and the club and everything, and also Jimmy Murphy, that was the first team coach of Manchester United under Sir Matt Busby. They had a similar title, and he sort of came up with the idea. What do you think of this title? Because the book is about predominantly my time at United. It is also obviously about my time working with and for Sir Alex Ferguson, and it's about my journey. How I eventually, how it started, how did I get to Man United, and what has happened after I left Man United. So that is basically, captures, the context of the book, really, the contents of the book.
Now, you've got quite a career. In fact, it's one that if I was to go through every aspect of your career, even just coaching wise, would be here for 4 or 5 hours, to be honest. You've gone
At least.
Qatar, Russia, Man United, Australia, pretty much everywhere. So when trying to put that into words and put this all into a book, was it hard to condense it all into the story, or were there certain things that you thought maybe I'll leave out? Were there certain things that you wish that you wrote about more, or did you have a good balance of things that weren't just Manchester United?
No, I think there's always things more, and afterwards that you think, yeah, whether it's a story or something. But I think in terms of real information, knowledgeable information, I think there's a really good balance in there. I think the people that would read it have got after reading the book, I think a really good understanding about, why I was so keen to go and work with Wheel Curver and how would that reflect to a youth development system without going too much over the top. But I think for the readers, they can understand where I'm coming from. That's the same with how I see, what in my opinion, what does a successful team look like? A club look like? What are the ingredients of that? A lot of people talk about it, but nobody really breaks it down. The question that I got asked many, many times about Sir Alex, why is Sir Alex Ferguson such a good manager? And I break that down, in my opinion, why he was such an excellent manager and if not the best that England has ever seen. So all that is a great, nice balance in there, wrapped up with a lot of momentous sort of stories about my experiences, about games and leagues that we went through. The highs and lows. Also the moment where we lost the league. With the goal from Aguero or City. Those are the things that are written in there as well. So that's all part and parcel of your journey. But yeah, I've read it. Obviously, I've had to read it a lot of times, and I've written a lot. To be fairly honest, a lot of it myself. Wayne helped me a lot, but in terms of the detail and the real stories about that knowledge, that all come from myself. And I wanted people to say, yeah, if they finish reading the book, I would like them to think they say it's really interesting, really, really interesting, very informative, and hopefully in times, and educational. That people can take things out of it. And it all depends who reads it. I mean, if a Man United fan will read it, he will like to probably indeed want to more all about Man United and all those stories that I have to tell about it. Coaches that are not necessarily Man United fans will look a little bit more with the expertise. Okay, what are really the real things that make Rene tick as a coach, and Man United and Sir Alex, etc. So there's something something to take, from a lot of readers, no matter where they come from.
Your book hasn't even been released yet at the time of recording, but you've already had quite a fair bit of interest in the book and yourself and your career. Does that surprise you or blow you away at all, the fact that so many people are wanting to know about you, are interested in this book? And, how does it make you feel to have all this sort of attention on yourself?
It doesn't blow me away. It's not something that I really, think about too much. It's obviously has a lot to do with the power still of the fact, and the brand Manchester United, because obviously I've spent over 12 years there, and basically in every single department in the club that you can imagine, whether it was the academy, at grassroots level, whether it was the reserve team or whether it was the first team. And the good thing was that I was very confident in the fact that I knew that I definitely could add something, when I was working individually with players, and eventually when I was the first team coach, how I could integrate that in a style of play that would be not only entertaining to watch but successful as well. And if you look back to those 6 years that I was the first team coach with Sir Alex, it turned out to be the most successful period in the history of Man United. So with not only me, I mean the whole team that was there, with including Mick Phelan and Eric Steele and Tony Strelick and Simon Wells, we had a tight knit, group. But that group really, supported by all other people, but that tight group was really running, with obviously Sir Alex Ferguson, who trusted us and delegated a lot to us, which is fantastic and phenomenal, really, because it was an absolute unique period, which you don't realize at the time, because when you're in it, your hard disk is swinging 24/7, and you just get on with things because there's another game around the corner. You've got no time to relax or to breathe because the next one is coming. And but it was a really pleasant, although really strange, really, because Man United, with the club that it is, they always have the highest ambitions. So with the ambitions comes the highest expectations, and with expectations comes pressure. But I never really felt that pressure, and that was solely down to the management style of Sir Alex Ferguson, who trusted us and getting on with things, and we never got carried away with the highs. We never got carried away with the lows. We just kept a steady course, making sure we got the performances, we got the wins, and hopefully the prizes at the end.
And finally, as we are running out of time, I think I'd be doing a big disservice if I didn't, being an Australian, mention the Socceroos. And it's quite funny and interesting to me how your career in coaching management pretty much started in Qatar, and it's come full circle to, being an assistant manager at the Socceroos at a Qatar World Cup, in the recent past. So how did your journey with Australian football first come? And what were your first real thoughts about Australian football and the Socceroos as a whole?
Well, obviously, how it came about is because I got to know Graham Arnold when he came to Man United for his pro license. I think so many years ago when he was still at United, and we sort of hit it off. Graham, I knew Graham because he played in Holland, for 2 clubs. I knew him as a striker, but still spoke a little bit of Dutch. So yeah, I explained them all the ins and outs, how we were doing. It was interesting. We always stayed in touch. And when he rang me, he said it's going to be a long shot, but to his wife, but they're going to try to see if Rene wanted to join me, because after I'm taking over the World Cup in 2018, and I've always had this ambition to do something with the national team, because in my opinion, international football for me is the purest form of professional football that exists, because club football is all decided by money and thus false. International football, you can't. You have to pick your best players available. Therefore, you have to have your grassroots football needs to be in place, your elite pathways, etc. But for us to achieve what we did under the banner, under the theme that Graham, greatly created, but we wanted to create the greatest Socceroos team ever.